Good afternoon, Congresswoman Christensen. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today. I know it's chaotic, so appreciate you.
Well,
very
welcome,
much.
and I'm glad to be able to have this little conversation with you.
Thank you very much. Well, a couple questions off the top. One of the top questions that's really interesting to me, your status as the non-voting delegate for the Virgin Islands. I'm sure that likely affords you a different perspective on the congressional process, and particularly given your tenure in Congress. What kind of trends have you seen evolve? Like, what's the culture like? How have things changed? What are your observations about just that congressional shift over the years?
Well, it's really interesting, the way that the partisan part has just exploded, so that we don't have the same kind of dialogue that we used to have before. I can give you a couple of examples. We used to have bipartisan retreats. They're gone. And they're gone for a good reason, because they began to change. I came in '97, and they began to change around 2002. We would generally be able to come out of there with one or two. They may not have been big agreements, but a consensus around one or two things going forward. And around 2000, 2002, well, let me say 2002, that started to change. And it made no sense for us to even try to have a dialogue. So we haven't had any bipartisan retreats in the last couple of years. When I first came here, the Women's Caucus, in particular, the Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues, it's always co-chaired by a Republican and a Democrat. And in the first 4 to 6 years, we were able to have an agenda that both parties, women on both sides of the aisle, would come together around, and we would get maybe 75% of it passed. We have not been able to do that over the last 7 years. So there's been a really dramatic shift, and the language on the floor has gotten, very, very much more strident. When I first came in, I would look at, maybe might seem a heated debate on the floor. Afterwards, folks would come off the floor, both sides, and they'd be walking down the hall, chatting, just as friendly as could be. And that still exists to some extent.
Yeah.
The fact that you may see very strong opinions on either side on the floor does not mean that there's not a camaraderie that might still be in place. But it's far less. It's far less than it used to be.
So do you think that some of that shift, particularly since the election of President Barack Obama, is in part because of the response that members get from their constituents? Like, do you think the American people want to see that fighting?
Oh, no, they don't.
Okay.
They really don't. Not in my district. If I've been on national TV and where there's a call-in, people do not want to see that. That is perhaps one of the issues that comes up most often. They really don't want to. They want to see us working together. But at least I would say that until maybe the Tea Party movement started, and because they, I think, have helped to create the wedge that you see between the parties now. I think it generated out of some of the opposition that the Republicans started to Barack Obama's agenda, and but it's kind of gotten a life of its own now, and it's gone to the wild extreme. So I think some of it is responding to the constituents, at least on that side. We continue to try to respond to our constituents, but most people do not want to see partisan bickering. They want to see both parties working together to improve the lives of the people that we're serving.
And to that point, are you able to still effectively champion the interests of your constituents in Congress, or do you get some pushback there? Or
Well, yes, to some extent. You mentioned the fact that I'm a non-voting delegate, and that is, in many cases, a drawback. And that's partly because I'm a non-voting delegate, but partly because I represent a territory. And territories, just by virtue of being territories, do not have the same access that states have. There are pieces of legislation that are still written where it states and the District of Columbia, which excludes us entirely. And so part of it is just that I'm not voting on final passage, and so I don't have that bargaining chip. Part of it is some of tradition. I'm the first delegate to ever sit on a major committee, Energy and Commerce, and I've been here 14 years. I'm a physician. There are no other physicians on the Democratic side of Energy and Commerce. They should have been running after me to come and be on Energy and Commerce. We're the 3 or 4 doctors on the Republican side. So it has hampered me somewhat. Being a member of the Black Caucus, though, has helped me to overcome some of that, because I'm also a constituency of 1. I'm a delegation of 1, like all of the territories are. But I have the 42 at this point, 42 other members who support me and become a delegation for me. In addition to that, being appointed to chair the Health Brain Trust gave me a national platform that I would not have otherwise had. And so we've been able to overcome it to some extent, but still, because we're territories and not states, we're not given equal treatment, and that became very much of a problem for us in the healthcare reform. We ended up getting a lot more than we might have gotten. The House did a wonderful job. The House really, probably because I'm on Energy and Commerce, also because all of the delegates are serving in the House. But we were able to get very robust provisions in the House bill. They went out the window in the Senate. And we had to really fight after the Senate bill came out to get some of our provisions put back. So we ended up with a fairly large Medicaid increase, not state-like treatment. We have a cap, which the states don't have. We have a 50-50 matching statute. No, sorry, we changed it. It's 55-45, but it's still too high a match for our income level. And we have very little money to share between the territories to create an exchange. So we don't have the full access at this point to an exchange. But this is the passage of the bill is the beginning. We have a lot of wonderful provisions that are going into effect September 23rd. And we have another few years to work on the other provisions and see if we can do a bit better than we did at the end of the passage of the bill.